Tales of Wells Fargo, starring Dale Robertson, usually seen at this time, will not be seen tonight so that we may bring you the following special program.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. If you're here at Word Balloon, it's because you like comics, creators, conversation, pop culture subjects. Would you consider joining the League of Word Balloon Listeners? Patreon.com/wordballoon. When you subscribe, you'll also be part of the Word Balloon Book Club, where Brian Michael Bendis and I will pick a comic every month to review and discuss live with the League on this show. Join the League today, patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you always for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. There we go. My mic was muted. Now we're good. How are we doing, everybody? It's time again for Word Balloon's Big Bout Podcast, where I take a break from talking about nerdy pop culture, and I talk about the sweet science of sport boxing that I've been a fan of and contributed as a reporter in print and in broadcasting for many years. And I'm very excited to talk to a good buddy that has been on the show many times, formerly the editor-in-chief of Ringside Seat and a major contributor to Ring Magazine, along with the author of several great boxing biographies. It's Bill Dettloff. Good to see you, Bill.
Good to see you, John. Thanks for having me back on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, congratulations, man. The Boxing Hall of Fame in New Jersey has made you another inductee.
Yes, that's true. I was inducted in November, and man, it was a great thrill. I don't live in New Jersey anymore. I grew up in Jersey, spent most of my formative years in Jersey, and I'll always be a Jersey boy at heart. So it was a real treat to be inducted. It was really great. I really appreciated the folks out there inducting me.
That's terrific, man. Of course, there's the Canastota, New York Hall of Fame as well. And is there one still in Vegas?
Yes, there is. Rich Murata runs the Las Vegas Boxing Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Very cool. And Ed Brophy, right, from Canastota?
He does the Canastota one. The International Boxing Hall of Fame is Ed Canastota. Ed Brophy's baby, yes.
That's cool. No, that's amazing. And I have friends that go every summer. Who else was inducted with you? Who was part of your class?
Wow.
Sorry.
No. You're good. Tom Hauser.
Tom Hauser's amazing. What a great author. My God.
Yes. And very prolific. Don Majeski,
Cool.
great matchmaker and historian. A couple of trainers whose names I don't remember. And the Polish light heavyweight and heavyweight from the 90s. Wow, I'm blanking on his name. Wow.
Not Galata.
No, he beat Galata. Wow.
Mikoslas or?
No.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of my Polish heavyweights, yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name, and I love the guy. He was a great fighter, won a light heavyweight title and the cruiserweight title, and did not win a heavyweight title. Fought Vitaly Klitschko, which was, of course, presented a huge difference in size, and I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. Wow. But yeah, he was inducted, and at some point during this podcast, John, I'll remember his name and blurt it out, but right now I'm drawing a blank.
Bill, that's what happens, man. You need the brain to relax, and then it'll pop in. This is what happens when we reach a certain age. So I met of a certain age, as they used to say. So I totally understand that. But no, I'm excited to talk to you. We're going to talk about some of the big fights that are coming up this year, and but we also want to look back. And Bill, I'm telling you, you know what kept me sane during COVID, and maybe you were the same way when there were no sports. It was like, thank God, YouTube, this amazing inventory of so many classic fights, and not only the obvious ones, like the Thrilla in Manila, like the Rumble in the Jungle, the Sugar Ray fights with Marvin, and the Four King fights, but also these great contender fights before the guys got famous, and thank God for that. And one that you wanted to talk about was this great fight between George Foreman and Ted Gullick. Am I right, Ted?
Yes, that's right. That's right. First, I should say that we live in such an amazing time that we have access to all these fights at the touch of a button or the click of a mouse. It's unbelievable. When I was a kid, I've talked about this before, I was a huge George Foreman fan. And when he retired after losing to Jimmy Young in 1977, I was heartbroken. And I would have given anything during those years to have seen videos of his fights against Frazier, both Frazier fights, and his 1976 fights against Ron Lyle and Scott Ledoux and Pedro Augusto and those guys, and even the Jimmy Young fight.
I'll even add the night where he fought five, lesser fighters on the same night.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would have given. God, and now I'm blanking. A guy who became a Chicago trainer and had also fought Ali was one of those five guys.
Is that right?
Yeah, I can't. And again, now I'm blanking on a name. Maybe my buddy Don Lenza, who's a big fight fan, might be watching and will help me remember who that. Maybe it was Alonzo Johnson. I think it was.
Yes, that sounds right. That sounds right. I wasn't aware he was a trainer. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But I would have given, even the Ali fight that Foreman lost, of course, and again, I was a huge Foreman fan, I would have given anything to be able to watch those fights. And now we have just about any fight that we can name or think of in our memories, we can watch. That's unbelievable. As much as we bitch about contemporary times and how our sport seems to have devolved or what have you, we are amazingly fortunate to have access to all these fights. And the one that you mentioned, the Foreman and Gullick fight, I happened to, I was on Twitter, and there's an outfit called Vintage Boxing TM. And again, lots of different guys put out duplicates of these fight videos. They're all over the place. You might have 10 or 11 versions of the same fight put out by different guys. And these guys at Vintage Boxing TM, they convert all these fights to HD, and they're often in not only the entire broadcast, including any production stuff and the weigh-ins if they can get them, and all the great interviews and stuff that the networks and HBO and such would do before the fights and after the fights. They include all that stuff. And also, we've all seen the Jimmy Jacobs collection of fights where there's, canned applause and, sound effects are added, and it's Jacobs doing the commentary, and it's all fake. This particular one, the Ted Gullick Foreman fight, which occurred in 1972, is the original broadcast. by the matchmaker and some local. There we go, and some local broadcaster. The fight took place at the Forum in Englewood, California. And it's the original broadcast. I'd seen this fight with Gullick 100 times, but it was the produced Jimmy Jacobs Fight of the Century version. This is the original broadcast.
Well, if I may, I can identify that other broadcaster, and he has a big celebrity connection. It's the guy on the left, everybody. That's Tom Harmon, who is the father of Mark Harmon. And Tom himself, he was a great athlete and an actor. And, well, I don't know, actually. I take the actor part back, perhaps. I could be misremembering. But I know Tom was related to Mark.
Really?
And,
that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, these were, he did fights on, I guess, CBS before Tim Ryan and Gil Clancy were doing fights and everything. And I miss those network days and the syndication days as well prior to that, that we were too young for. But again, it's so great to see these on, like, all the old New York fights that Don Dunphy did in the 60s. And also even going back to the newsreel stuff. And I those Jimmy Jacobs, Bill Caton fights, they're still fun to watch. Even, with Jimmy's kind of fake, commentary and, after the fact commentary. But no, this is a lost era. And God, I'm glad to talk about this. And it's interesting to watch Foreman because this is before he won the title against Joe Frazier. How many fights before the Frazier fight?
2 or 3 fights before the Frazier fight. It was in 1972. 10 months later and 2 fights later, he fought Frazier for the title and won it, of course. And you can see if you watch, and I would urge all of your viewers or listeners right now, John, to go ahead and put in, go to YouTube, open up another screen in a web browser and go to YouTube and put in George Foreman, Ted Gullick, and look for the version that's out there by Vintage Boxing TM. And there are so many interesting things that are happening here. And I watched this on via a Twitter link or a tweet, I should say. I'm sorry. And I was just blown away by how different broadcasts were then as opposed to now, for good and bad. And it's interesting. I read an author once that wrote, if you're going to read widely, make sure you read not just contemporary stuff, but stuff from a different era. Not because it's better or worse, just because it's different than what you're used to experiencing, right? And that pertains to boxing also, I guess, into anything. And not only how the fighters perform, but the quality of the production and the way the broadcasters talk and what the referees do. For example, and again, I jotted down some notes of things that just jumped out at me while I was watching this video. And the first thing is that, of course, they do. This is 1972, so ring announcers were still doing the deal where they call all the fighters into the ring beforehand that are in attendance. And they introduce them to the crowd. And most old school fight fans like you and I, John, love that and wish they would do it now, but they can't do it now because the ring walk takes a half an hour. Right? Well, when the guys walk to the ring, it takes a half hour, right?
I so hear you, but also couldn't they, given that there is that lull of literally sometimes more than a half hour between the second and last fight and the main event, and you've got all this time, and instead of these color commentators blathering, by the way, everybody, when I say color commentator, I do mean the analyst. I don't, I don't want to think there's a pejorative there, but, but yeah, you never know. Say, hey, wait a minute, but anyway, so there's plenty, because they eventually do scan around the ring and, oh, look, there's Evander Holyfield. There's Mike Tyson. There's Lennox Lewis, whomever. And yeah, man, it's like, bring them up. My God. I don't understand. Somebody get a memo to Turk, the man in charge of the riot fights that we get from Saudi Arabia, and that should start happening again. So we got to send them old videos and go, this is the way they used to do it, and it was at least entertaining.
Yeah, I don't understand why that stopped, or even exactly when.
But name some of the guys, man, that they ring announce and everything.
Well, most of them I never heard of, to be honest. Sugar Ramos was one of the guys, of course, and that was cool. I was most intrigued by the introductions of Jerry and Mike Quarry. To see both of those guys so young and fresh. I think Quarry was undefeated in 30 fights Mike Quarry was undefeated in 30 fights at the time about that, and was the number 2 light heavyweight in the world. And Jerry Quarry, both of these guys looking so young and fresh, and we know what happened to both of those and how badly it ended up for them. To see them in that And Jerry was still fighting and in his prime at that point also. Interestingly, I thought that Mike got the better hand from the crowd than Jerry did, which was interesting to me because those guys are both, of course, California guys. By the way, the fighter's name I was thinking of is Thomas Adamek.
Oh, sure. Tomas Adamek, of course.
Yeah,
absolutely,
man. I love that guy, and I just blanked on his name.
No, hell of a fighter. Absolutely.
Yeah, and he was inducted the same night as I was, which is a terrible thing. If Thomas Adamek is a much better fighter than I'm a writer, so I feel humbled that he would be inducted the same night as me.
I believe he fought at the United Center in Chicago and had a light heavyweight fight there. Maybe
one of his last ones. Yeah, there's a large Polish contingent out there, as you know, and they're all fight fans. So I'm sure. I'm sure he fought there. Yeah.
You know, Andrew Galata, he came here and was obviously based here during his pro career. And actually, just for a second, as a tangent, mentioning Galata, he lives in suburban Chicago on the same block as one of my old junior high and high school friends.
Wow,
and,
really?
and he's got a special needs son who's a sweet kid, but is a bit on the spectrum. And Andrew is very quiet, obviously, and he always was. He was, folks, if you don't remember Andrew Galata, big contender of the 90s and early 2000s, fought Tyson, fought Lennox Lewis twice in two very Riddick Bowe twice in two shameful fights where he kept hitting him low. But was very much like Ivan Drago in Rocky IV and in Creed II. Very monosyllabic. Well, he's got a big, giant dog. And he walks the neighborhood with his dog. And the kid has no fear whatsoever. And is such a personable kid. He's like, hey, I love your dog. He's like, thank you. And he's like, what's your dog's name? And I don't remember the dog's name. And he goes, that's a really cool dog. Hey, that's great. You know, and just, gushing about him. And other neighborhood people saw this exchange and told my friend, your son is like the first person I ever saw have an actual personable conversation where Andrew Galata was actually willing to talk to somebody. So I love
That's cool.
And I just learned this like last year, and it's one of my favorite boxing stories.
That's interesting. He's such an interesting guy, the way things worked out for him. What a fascinating case study he would be.
And in that multi-belt era, probably should have been a contender if he just was a little more strategy-minded and not just a slugger.
Well, you know what? Yeah, we're going off on a tangent, but I don't mind this at all because you know what? Galata had some real skills. He was a very skilled guy. He was putting it to Riddick Bowe like nothing. And not just being a slugger or, muscling him. Guy knew how to punch in combination. He had a real good jab. He knew when to go to the body when he wasn't hitting in the nuts. He was for a real big heavyweight. He really had good skills, but it just wasn't. I don't know if it was a matter of he was panicking or afraid of success, or he just got scared, or when it got too rough, he couldn't handle it, and he kind of found a way out. Really interesting psychological case study Angel Galata would be. Wish I could get inside his head, but not for too long. Right, I can't imagine it's a nice place.
Listen, truly, I'm like, hey, maybe I should, through my friend and through his son, try and contact him and see if he'd be willing to talk. And it's like, yeah, maybe not. Because honestly, he's like a very intimidating guy. But also, even before the two Riddick Bowe fights, if people don't remember, they're on YouTube. You can watch them and see him, unfortunately, as Bill just said, continually hit Riddick Bowe low in the nuts. My God, one of the fights, a massive riot broke out after the fight at Madison Square Garden.
What a great night. That was a great night for boxing.
And, I learned from both Bert Sugar and Chet Kopic, a Chicago broadcaster who was a very good friend of mine and in attendance at the time, George Foreman protected those guys.
Yeah.
Because a bunch of guys charged where the broadcast was happening or where the press line was. And all of a sudden, giant George Foreman, the size of a building, is like, back off. And everybody did. And truly, I don't remember Bert ever told me, but Chet's like, George saved our lives that night. So,
I believe it.
And another fight that, unfortunately, that he kind of fouled in, I was a little suspect of him, of his, strategy or mindfulness or whatever. But do you remember when he was still a contender, too? He fought Samson Puja.
And he bit him. Yeah. And he bit him
on the shoulder a couple times.
Hurt him. Right. And he bit him on the shoulder. Absolutely right.
That's pre-Holyfield biting or Tyson biting Holyfield for that matter.
Yeah, it was pre that. Again, a real interesting psychological case study that he was just, I guess, not mentally strong enough when he was challenged, but he was kicking Riddick Bowe's ass, so that wasn't it. So I don't know.
Sam Colonna, his trainer. I mean, I remember passionately, don't hit him low. Please don't hit him low. Please don't hit him low. And I don't know, something happened. Galata just reflexively. I don't know.
Very strange guy. Yeah, very strange guy. But he at a fairly high level, that dude could really fight. He did some things you don't see a lot of heavyweights doing.
I hear you, man. No, we were all honestly here in Chicago. We all figured that this guy could be a champion. Yeah. And when I was writing for Boxing Illustrated, I was covering and broadcasting. I was covering him very diligently. Absolutely. So some of the other recent old time fights I've been enjoying, and in fact, you've written that great biography of Matthew Saad Muhammad, and I'm sorry I don't have the covers up to promote it better for you, Bill. But that's truly, two great light heavyweight biographies. The first one you did on Ezra Charles, which is outstanding.
Thank you.
And in fact, again, damn it, I should have. I'm not doing my homework, Bill. Well, another reason why. One of my friends and a big viewer and listener of Word Balloon, Don Lenza, had this weird picture of a trainer and a boxer, and he's like, "Who is this?" Some people thought it was Larry Holmes when he was really young. So he goes, more people were saying it's probably Ezra Charles. I'm like, there's no way in hell that's Ezra Charles, because the shape of his head was a little more oblong than Ezra's round face.
Okay,
that I've know from both newsreels and fight highlights, and of course your book as well. But I'd really, I'm wondering if you can identify, and then maybe you could pass this photo around and see if we can figure out who the hell it is. But also, especially during COVID, I really got into that late 70s pre-Michael Spinks era, and actually including Michael.
Right.
But that light heavyweight era, which I think the average fight fan probably doesn't think about as much as they should, and how highly competitive it was.
Yeah, I've said a few times, I've written a couple of times that, and since in my lifetime, and even before that, as far as I know, that was the deepest light heavyweight division that's ever been, with the possible exception of the Ezra Charles light heavyweight division, which included Archie Moore and all those other great light heavyweights that were part of Murderer's Row. That was a very deep light heavyweight division. And there are guys who will say that one occurred in the 1940s automatically makes it better than the one that occurred in the 1970s because they fought more often and that kind of thing. You can make that argument. But either way, the one in the late 70s and early 80s was a deep light heavyweight division. You had Victor Galindez, Yaki Lopez, Matthew Saad Muhammad, Marvin Johnson, young Michael Spinks coming up, Jerry Celestine, James Scott, Dwight Muhammad Cowie, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. Did I say him already?
No.
It was just Eddie Davis and Johnny Davis and
Jerry Martin.
Jerry Martin, another one, of course. And
yeah, man. I mean, my God, that's at least 10. And that's the thing, man. And they fought each other.
They fought each other.
Marvin Johnson. Did we mention Marvin Pops Johnson?
Marvin Johnson, of course, fought Matthew Saad Muhammad twice. Fought Spinks. Fought Eddie Gregory or Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. It's kind of a crime that he's not in the International Boxing Hall of Fame, because he probably should be. I just saw it tonight. There's some voices out there trying to get Yaki Lopez in, also. But yeah, and he fought everybody, right? And fought Galindez twice. Fought Matthew Saad Muhammad twice. Fought Spinks. All those guys in that era fought one another. Many of them multiple times. Right, Matthew Saad Muhammad and Eddie Mustafa Muhammad fought, and they would have fought again if Harold Smith hadn't got busted for the home maps thing. They were going to be on that gigantic card. That's all in my book. But
okay, good. I was going to say people should read that, because it's an amazing, real scandal that happened with the promoter and the way he got his money. And I'll leave it at that and let people buy the book and find out the story of that. But here, real fast, Rudy Hernandez had a question. He said he doesn't get discussed often because he died young, but Salvador Sanchez was really good. Do you guys think he would have made it to Julio Cesar Chavez level had he not died in the auto accident?
I think he absolutely would have. And here's the thing, though, and I'm in the minority on this. A lot of people call him Sanchez the greatest Mexican fighter ever. Some even say the greatest featherweight fighter ever. I think that's a real stretch. But the guy got a lot done at a very young age, fought very frequently, even frequently by the standard of the 1970s and 80s. He fought a lot, fought top-notch competition, and didn't really have any weaknesses that we saw, right? And so some people rate him very highly as, again, possibly the greatest Mexican fighter ever. I don't, because it almost benefits him from a historical perspective that he died so young.
Yeah.
Right. We never got to see him when he was past his prime, when he was a little worn down. If he was going to have a bad night, had him really battle back from adversity. We didn't see all those things that we might have if he had fought another 5 years or 10 years. And what was he, 23, 24 when he died? He was very young.
I didn't even realize that young. But am I right? Was his last fight against Azuma Nelson?
Yes. Yes.
And Azuma Nelson became, a legendary featherweight.
Sure.
Yeah. Know, so no, you're right about that. And no, it's like James Dean as an actor.
Right.
We only know him from his 4 films and his handful of television shows that he did in the 50s and stuff. And we don't know what could have happened. Absolutely.
Right. So it's a tired comparison by now. But if Mike Tyson had retired after the Michael Spinks fight, people are making the case that he was the greatest heavyweight champion ever, right? Or if Roy Jones retired after beating John Ruiz, people would be saying that, right? So it may not be fair to Sanchez, but you have to do it that way. You don't know what would have happened in the rest of his career. I'll say this too, by the way, that he tended to fight to the level of his competition. The better his competition, the better he fought. Look what he did to Wilfredo Gomez. I don't know anybody was expecting that. Well, maybe some people were in Mexico, but if I remember, I think Gomez was the favorite in that fight, and there was every reason to make him the favorite. But against other guys like Pat Cowdell, he wasn't that good. He made a couple title defenses more difficult than they had to be. But I guess maybe he was bored or whatever. But he tended to fight down to the level of his competition. All that said, he was a wonderful, really great fighter, and I think he certainly would have been. The chances are, and the odds are, that he would be mentioned in the same breath easily as Julio Cesar Chavez, or any of the other greatest. Juan Manuel Marquez, you got to put him up there too. You just have to, with Chavez as the guys among the greatest Mexican champions. But sure, I think he'd be up there.
Also that reminds me too of how great, again in the 70s and in the early to mid 80s, how great the bantam and featherweight divisions were.
Absolutely.
And Philadelphia, of course, we had Jeff Chandler, but so many great fighters like Danny Little Red Lopez and Ruben Olivares, right?
Olivares was he was a little earlier, but you might maybe you're thinking Ruben Castillo.
Ruben Castillo, of course, yes. Okay. And of course, the explosive thin man himself, Arguello. I mean, that's the thing. Again, it is so great, and I'm just so disappointed in the modern product, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. But I don't know. And again, maybe we're looking through rose-colored glasses. But as you say, guys like Sanchez had his middling fights, as did others. Sure. God, Ali, Jimmy Young. I remember. Bill, were you old enough to watch that live?
Sure, I watched it. Yeah, and at the time, I despised Ali because he beat my man Foreman. And I went to school the next day. Telling everybody, and this was, it was 1978, I guess, right? Yeah,
or 77, something like that. Yeah, it was before the Spinks. It was before the first Leon Spinks fight.
Right. And everybody in my grammar school knew who Muhammad Ali was, and everybody watched it because it was on Channel 7 on a weeknight or something crazy.
Thursday night. It was like a Thursday night, and that's what they. I mean, again, folks, you'll forgive us, but that's the thing. Boxing was so big. It was on over-the-air network television the way Major League Basketball or baseball or football or hockey, even hockey occasionally. But actually, no, not prime time for hockey. That's the thing. Thursday. And also, this is when big fights were on Thursdays and Mondays to extend the gambling weekend.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
I mean, a lot of those fights, it was kind of, especially the ones that were housed in Vegas, it was like, all right, here's an extra day for the weekend for the gamblers and stuff. Okay. But oh my God. And it was Cosell and it was Wide World of Sports, but on a primetime Ali presentation, and a very fat Ali against Jimmy Young. I'll let you take over from there.
Well, that's okay. Well, the thing I remember is going to school the next day and telling my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Kershala, I remember this vividly, that Ali got a gift decision and Jimmy Young was robbed. And she said, "You're only saying that because you're prejudiced against Ali because he beat Foreman." She was right.
Oh, I don't know. Bill, I'd have to rewatch that fight because honestly, Muhammad really let Jimmy Young slap him around. And at the very least, it should have been a draw, in my opinion.
Well, I've heard arguments go both ways, and I kind of get this, that you can't give the heavyweight title to a guy who sticks his head out the ropes outside the ring to keep from getting hit.
That's
but
true.
It's just a derisible fight any way you look at it. But I guess the point I was going toward there, no, is that everybody knew. Everybody knew exactly what I was talking about. Everybody had watched it the night before. That's just the way it was. But if we can get back to that Gullick-Foreman fight real quick, or Foreman-Gullick fight real quick, just a couple of things that stuck out to me that were so interesting. When the fighters were introduced, we talked about the ring intros, of course, and introducing the fighters. When the ring announcer and everybody, if you started watching the Foreman-Gullick fight and stopped it while we went off on a tangent about Galata and ended up here, go back and pause us and go back and watch it, and you'll see that when the ring announcer introduces Gullick, he doesn't say what his record is. He never announces his record.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and I assume, and his record was 15-5-1, by the way. And
maybe that's why.
Exactly right. I assume it's because they wanted it to, people to think it was going to be competitive. Right. Sure. Exactly right. They announced Foreman's record, which was 34-0 at the time with 31 knockouts. Okay. But they didn't announce Gullick's record. 15-5-1 isn't terrible.
No.
Right. And I'll tell you what, Gullick, probably one of the better 15-5-1 fighters I've seen. He did some good work in that first round. Not a terrible fighter at all. With a record of 15-5-1, I would have thought he was worse than he was. He wasn't a bad fighter, but this was one of the most interesting things to me. Foreman and Gullick are called to the center of the ring by referee Dick Young, and he starts giving them the finals instructions. Okay, and Young tells Gullick to show him his mouthpiece, and Gullick does, and then he tells George, "Let me see your mouthpiece." And George is so intent on staring Gullick down, the way he did in those days, right, that he ignores Young's first two requests to see his mouthpiece. And then Dick Young grabs Foreman's face and says, "George, let me see your mouthpiece." And it was surprising to me to see him manhandle George that way, right? And George points back to one of his trainers, and the trainer goes against the mouthpiece or whatever. And here's the most interesting thing about it. As Young continues to give him the instructions, he starts massaging the back of the fighters' necks as he's talking to them. It's not odd, like the way a trainer would. This is the referee. Yeah, that's what he's doing. He's got a hand on each of the fighters' necks, and he's massaging them. That seems so odd to me.
I completely agree. I've never seen a referee do that before. That's fantastic.
And this is not an unknown referee. Dick Young was everywhere. He refereed fights in California for 40 years, and then he was a judge after that.
Yeah, kind of like Arthur Mercanti was senior and junior, but senior in New York at the Garden and everything. So
exactly.
Well, so maybe he felt that familiar, that he was such a fixture with California fights, that he felt like, hey boys, let's keep it nice or whatever.
Very odd. And I thought that's one thing that you would never see a referee do today. I can't imagine that happening.
No.
It's just something that's not that it was bad. It just jumped out at me as that's awful odd. Right. So that was weird. And Foreman, I never noticed as much as I did in this fight how much George parries. And there may be some fight fans here who don't know what that term means. And it's just like pushing your opponent's arms or punches away with an open glove, which you don't see a lot of these days. But Foreman did it when he was pushing fighters off a lot, or just what looked like pushing them off. He was actually pushing his hands on their arms so they couldn't punch. When they would get ready to throw a punch, he would push their arms or shoulders off balance. And that was part of his defense. And
something he also did in his later years as well.
Sure,
he would parry, parry punches like that. Absolutely. Keep going.
Yeah, I don't see anybody do that anymore. I think partially because referees are much more vigilant about pushing than they used to be. And in fact, I think a lot of referees are overly officious now with a lot of the rules, right? It's a fight, but especially with pushing. Nobody can push anybody anymore. But anyway, so Foreman did a lot of that, which you don't see anymore. And he gets warned about it by Dick Young in between rounds. Oh, and the post-fight interview with Foreman and Dick Sadler and Johnny Smith, who I've never seen all of Foreman's fights. I've never seen him in any Foreman fight in the corner ever. So I wasn't aware of him, and I tried to look him up. I looked him up. I didn't find his record anywhere. He's a former fighter, apparently. But the post-fight interview with the matchmaker and Dick Sadler and Foreman is just great. And Sadler talks about parrying and the science behind parrying and how it's an old Jack Johnson trick. It's really interesting. And Dick Sadler was a real character. George wasn't fond of him even when he was his manager and trainer.
Really?
They had a lot of problems because he kept selling off pieces of George's management contract. About 17 different people owned pieces of George by the time he got the title shot. But and George maintains to this, or I can't say maintains to this day anymore, but he maintained his entire career that he felt like Sadler poisoned him in the Ali fight. I don't know.
Wow. What? Am I right? Was he related to Sandy Sadler, the featherweight champ?
Yes, cousins. Yes. Even though they spelled their last names wrong, Sandy Sadler with 2 D's, and Dick Sadler with 1 D.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And Sandy and Archie Moore were both advisors to George early in his pro career.
When George during the second wave, when he came back and everything and was building towards the Holyfield fight, he fought an exhibition here in Chicago against Tim Jeepers Creepers Tomaszek.
I remember Jeepers
Creepers. And man, listen, everybody, you might know Butterbean, the big 300+ pound guy that used to the king of the 4-rounders. Give me a break. Tim Tomaszek was a ham and egger, was really just this great kind of fighter that sometimes would come on on a short notice. In fact, he fought Tommy Morrison.
Right.
Yeah, and when they were going to make Tommy Morrison and Michael Bent, who fought each other in Rocky V as Union Kane and Tommy Gunn.
Right.
And so the HBO was going to do the big fight. And Michael Bent, and you might know the reason why Michael Bent pulled out at the last minute, but they couldn't cancel the event. So they got Tim Jeepers Creepers in there. And anyway, but when he fought, my point being that when he fought Foreman in this exhibition in Chicago, Archie was there. Archie Moore was there. It's the one time I got to meet Archie Moore, the great Archie Moore, one of the top 5 ever, I think, boxers of all time. Brilliant fighter. Brilliant light heavyweight, of course.
Absolutely. He was in George's corner for much of his first career and for a fair amount in his second career. And also Sandy Sadler, also in the entirety of George's pre-Ali career, but not at all in the second career. And again, not Dick Sadler either in his second career. So George jettisoned all those guys and hooked up with, for a short while, Kid Rapides and Gil Clancy and Charlie Shipes. Charlie Shipes was a guy who was with Foreman throughout his second career, meaning from 76 through 77, which consisted of 5 fights, starting with Ron Lyle and ending with Jimmy Young. So his comeback was really his third career.
The Ron Lyle fight, folks, if you've never heard or seen it, is epic. And I love Cosell's call. It's funny, I noticed on Twitter recently, Al Bernstein kind of crapping on Cosell, and he's not a big Cosell fan.
Right.
I felt Cosell added drama to all of his calls. And I mean, Down Goes Frazier is classic. And, remember the time when Foreman was able to destroy Joe Frazier. Look at him now. And it's a great seesaw fight. Both guys go down. Ron Lyle, vastly underrated as a 70s heavyweight contender. Again, that's the greatest decade, as you would likely agree, of heavyweight boxing, I think.
Yeah, probably. Because my hero was fighting during that period, yeah. But I think, I think the 90s are a very close second. I think the 90s are a very close second.
Sure. Well, we had Lewis and Bo and Tyson and Holyfield and, Michael Moore and, and even, again, a lot of good contenders in that period as well, and I guess you could put Galata in there.
Sure. Galata and the third coming of George Foreman and of Mike Tyson and Mike Ibeabuchi and Chris Bird and a lot of very good heavyweights, and they were all fighting each other. Yeah,
you're right about that, man. Well, that's
David Tua. Yeah,
David Tua, of course, another great slugger. My God, when he fought Hasim Rahman for 9 rounds, I was a genius because we were down in Vegas, and I told my 2 friends, bet on Rahman, and he was winning that fight clearly. And then at the end of like the 8th or 9th round, Tua hit him like at the bell, totally had him out on his feet. And that 1 minute before they came back out, Rahman could not get his act together. And my friends are like, well, he'll be okay, right? I'm like, we're screwed. We are screwed. He's going to get knocked out in the next round. And sure enough, it happened. And I'm like, and literally, they're like, for 9 rounds, you were a genius. And I'm like, that's boxing, man. One punch can change it all.
That's right. That's absolutely right. It happened, and it happens today.
Yeah.
And, even so, even when he got stopped, because he was still completely buzzed when he came out for the next round. Even at that, I thought the fight was stopped too quickly. I thought he deserved more of a chance to get his shit together. But
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's a shame. And also, as you said, in that 90s, early 2000s period, these guys would fight each other more. And, it was weird, Bill, because it really felt like me, especially, I hate to say it, but when the Saudis got involved in boxing and started putting up more money and everything, we were finally starting to see contenders versus contenders in the last couple of years. And it's been great. I don't know about in the heavies, because I think it does still happen to a degree in the heavies, but it seems to me in the lighter weights, now we're almost back to the way things were 20 years ago, where these guys are more worried about protecting their records than facing each other. And it's getting really frustrating watching some of the top current guys. I don't know what you think about that, but it just seems to me that there's a lot of talent in a lot of these lighter weight divisions, like the lightweights, like the welterweights, even the middleweights and on up. And like I said, they seem to find more excuses not to fight each other.
I don't feel a sense of frustration with that.
No,
I don't. In fact, I think you can say a lot of things about how the sport is looking with the takeover by our friends in Saudi Arabia, and it is a takeover.
Yes.
I think for the most part, they're doing some things that fight fans have wanted to have done for decades, right? I think to a large degree, I think the ultimate goal is to lessen the impact of the sanctioning bodies. And I think they're on the way to doing that. It seemed like it was going to happen more quickly when they first came on the scene than it is now. But I think that's the ultimate goal, and I think they're going to achieve that. It also seems like a lot of fights were made almost immediately that weren't going to be made otherwise when they started throwing their money around. They got deep pockets, and they got money to burn. And so a lot of fights that I think wouldn't have gotten made if they weren't throwing so much money at the game. Now, and I think a lot of times it seems like the best fighters aren't fighting one another as often as we would like them to. But it happens in every era. We can all look back at an era and say, here are 5 fights that should have happened that never did. We can all do that.
Agreed.
And
well, I always said that about Roy Jones. I mean, listen, Roy Jones is an all-time great. However, it is very easy to point to several top guys from Thomas Hearns to others that he avoided. And Bill, I don't know if we talked about it before, but when I was still on Sporting News Radio, when Roy beat John Ruiz for the WBA heavyweight title, I was on a show and with one of the hosts, and he's like, "Well, that's a big accomplishment." I'm like, "That's an accomplishment, small letter A." I'm like, he beat the 5th best heavyweight currently. I said, if he had beaten Lennox Lewis, then we'd be talking, and then I would be much more excited and exuberant. But I'm like, he picked the right guy to beat, and sometimes a good little man beats a good big man.
Sure, absolutely. So to get back to your original point, John, I don't feel the same frustration, at least, that I used to. I think, again, these guys have made a lot of fights happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise, because they have such deep pockets. One fight that I think why don't we just touch upon here while we're talking about this?
Sure.
That there was absolutely no clamor for, but is happening, and that's Canelo and Terrence Crawford. I don't know a single person who I heard saying, wow, wouldn't that be great if Terrence Crawford and Canelo fought? They just kind of, like, to use the term that Matt Aguilar, my friend, used recently when talking about, they just kind of manufactured this fight and want to sell it and make a lot of money. I guess that's fine. And, the more I think about it, it is an interesting fight. And
potentially.
Almost primarily because of the weight difference, right? But but nobody was looking for this fight. Nobody was saying, wow, wouldn't it be great if they could fight? This is a dream match. It just kind of happened.
Well,
so that's kind of weird.
Yeah, but think of all the guys that they're avoiding within their own respective weight classes. I know that Terrence is moving up from 147.
Right.
And listen, he did fight. Listen, he basically cleaned out a lot of the not everybody, but a lot of 147 guys, including Errol Spence. And we did get to finally see him that big fight. And Errol, unfortunately, probably still wasn't the same guy he was prior to his auto accident. So I'm sure that was a factor. But, I mean, this is weird. And I don't.
It is a weird fight.
And Canelo is so much bigger. And listen, I know Canelo's like 35, 36. So maybe he's just over the peak of his prime. Maybe. I don't know. But also, I think he's got it unless he screws around or allows him, Terrence Crawford to be there longer and carry him for a bit. I think this is going to be home cooking. And once he steps close, and if he tags him, he's going to hurt him.
He's going to hurt Crawford, you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's a. I don't see. If I were betting this fight, and I'm certainly not, just because you never know what's going to happen. And Crawford is a very talented fighter, but really, unless Canelo doesn't take it seriously, I don't see how he loses. Frankly.
Yeah, I don't really see it either. I favor Canelo. I think he's fought much better competition over the course of his career than Crawford has. Crawford's an excellent fighter, but and I might be overestimating or overvaluing Canelo, and I definitely agree with your assessment that he's just past his peak. Yeah, a little bit, but he's still a hell of a fighter.
Yeah.
So I guess to me it's interesting, but that's all it is. Like I would rather see Terrence Crawford fight Boots Ennis, right? That
who
to
is
me
rising
is a
up?
good fight.
Who's rising up in weight? And again, that would be great. And again, I think Crawford is still close enough to his prime. And I would agree. That's the thing, Bill. This is what I'm talking about. And it also seems like some of these lighter weight fighters are moving up to avoid the competition that is there in their own divisions and stuff. And I don't mean Terrence necessarily, but Boots as well. Now, maybe again, Boots is a young guy. Maybe he's just getting too big to be 135, 140 anymore. You mentioned you wanted to talk about Shakur Stevenson and what he's got. That's why I keep looking at my phone while we're talking. But
okay.
So Shakur Stevenson Zepeda. Tell me about that fight in your opinion.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna get shit for this. I know it. I'm gonna get shit for this. But and hear me out, okay? Everybody, hear me out. Let me finish this. Shakur Stevenson is our Pernell Whitaker. I'm not saying he's the next Pernell Whitaker. I'm not saying he's as great as Pernell Whitaker, right? But Shakur Stevenson can box his ass off, and he beats guys as easily as Pernell Whitaker did. He's not touchable right now by the level of guy he's fighting. He's a really good boxer, and I think he's really improved over the last year and a half or so. He's fighting a good guy in Zepeda, and some people give Zepeda a chance. I don't. I think Shakur is going to shut him out the way he shuts everybody out. He's really a hell of a fighter. And I look at him and I look how he boxes, and I'm like, this fucking guy can fight. He's really good.
Well, I hope you're right.
He's not going to lose a lot of rounds.
I really hope you're right. I think it is an interesting matchup. I'm not ready to pick somebody, but I love your point of view on it. So that's great. I'm looking at this list here and everything. And so Mario Barrios versus Manny Pacquiao. So is this his comeback opponent? And how long, Manny? How long has he been out? 4 years? 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's 3 years.
3 years, okay.
And I think he's 46. He's in his mid to late 40s. Or something.
When he fought Ugas, Yorlindis Ugas, my cousin was very proud of me because my cousin is a big gambler. And I'm like, listen, I know you don't know who this Ugas guy is. He's a former Olympian. He's a lefty. He is bigger than Pacquiao. Pacquiao is at the end of his career and losing to guys that he would have no business losing to 3 or 4 years ago. Bet your money on Ugas, even though he's an underdog. And my cousin did quite well. And he's like, Johnny, you're a genius. And I'm like, no. And I just pay attention and I know what's happening, as I'm sure you guys did too when you were covering the fight live.
Yeah, Pacquiao.
It's sad.
It almost surprised me that it took this long, because look at these fighters can never retire and stay retired. They need a really bad beating, and Lucas fight wasn't going to do it. And if you've seen video of Pacquiao training, damn, he looks happy. He looks so happy to be in the gym. No, and you can't blame him.
Yeah.
What is he doing? Hanging out with his wife and hanging out with politicians?
Hanging out in exactly the Philippine Congress, basically,
exactly.
as a Philippine legislator.
Right?
Yeah.
So he's back in the gym hanging out with Boo Boy and Freddie and going running and hanging out with his boys and working out. That's great. That's fun. That's why even football players like all these quarterbacks in their 40s now, why would they want to go home and hang out with their wife and kids? They can hang out with their boys and play football. That's a party, right?
Well, and that whole, my God, just vibe of being the champ and the idolation and everything, especially when you're even more so when you're an active athlete as opposed to a farm one. Well, and again, sadly, it's the same old story, and I certainly hope Manny, does well. And well, I don't know. I'm of two minds because I don't want to see him hurt, but I also don't want to see him, like we saw Ray Leonard end against Terry Norris or Joe Frazier. Joe Frazier, Jumbo Cummings, and
exactly right.
Ali, Trevor Burbick,
Right, exactly right. That's a double-edged sword. You don't want to see him get beat so bad that he gets hurt. But if he doesn't get a good beating, it's not going to stick. It's not going to stick. The last one has to be bad most of the time. 90% of the time, the last fight has to be a bad one. And the pain is so intense that you can't forget it. And that keeps you from going back. I tweeted recently that every time a fighter comes back, sooner or later he gets reminded of why he quit in the first place. He gets that moment and it flashes in his mind, shit, yeah, that's why I quit. That's why I retired. But if he's in the middle of the fight, it's too late.
Another great old 70s fight that is interesting to watch is I want to say it was 72 or 73, Ali against Floyd Patterson, their rematch.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I know I got to interview Floyd briefly on radio in the 90s when his adopted son Tracy was an active featherweight, and we asked him, we said, what was it that made you quit? And he said, I could see the openings when I was fighting Ali, but my reflexes were not fast enough to know what my brain was seeing and move the way that I did. And he goes, and listen, my God, he was almost at that point fighting professionally for almost 20 years because he started so young. Right. But that's another interesting fight, I think, to watch. And really, if you want to see a much better performance, oh God, now I'm blanking. It was part of the WBA tournament when Ali was in exile and they were trying to get the WBA. And I forget who he fought, and it was a really close.
Quarry, Ellis, Jimmy Ellis, probably.
Yeah, it was Jimmy Ellis. Absolutely, yeah. That Patterson Ellis fight is fun to watch. Yeah,
it's a good fight. And Patterson is interesting because he loved boxing so much. He never officially announced his retirement. He just stopped fighting, right? He never came out and said, I'm retiring, because he always wanted to leave it open that if he wanted to fight again, he could. He loved boxing so much. But there comes a time when you can't. And as far as Pacquiao goes, well, if the point is not to get hurt but to win a belt, right? Barrios is the right guy because he's nothing great. I don't really see him hurting Pacquiao. And in fact, I could see him being a little intimidated. Like the way I think when Keith Thurman fought Pacquiao, and Pacquiao was well past his prime by that point, I think Thurman had everything he needed to win that fight. But at some point, he looked across the ring and said, "Holy shit, that's Manny Pacquiao over there." And he just got intimidated, and he didn't fight the way he should have fought. I think he had all the tools to beat Pacquiao.
Agreed.
He just couldn't do it mentally. And I think Barrios, even though he knows he's got an old guy in front of him, might feel the same way. So I think, again, if the point is to win a fight and win a title and not get hurt, I think they picked the right guy in Barrios. Because he's nothing great.
Yeah. When next month or this month or? Forgive me.
I think it's July. I think it's July.
So yeah, just in a few weeks or so.
Yeah.
Cool. I also want to talk. And listen, I hope you got enough time. I don't want to mess you up.
We're good. We're good.
I want to go through your list here too. Well, obviously, the rematch between Usyk and Daniel Dubois will be very interesting. And that first fight, I'll let you describe what happened. But you got to admit, I mean, listen, there's a reason why Usyk is great, and listen, he beating Tyson Fury twice and everything, obviously cemented, and truly his whole climb to the heavyweight title has been great. But I got to admit, Dubois has been very impressive since that first loss to Usyk. So, yeah, give me your assessment of both guys.
Usyk is a marvel. I described him once in ringside seat as a Rubik's cube of a heavyweight. He's very hard to figure out, and he's got this great motor. You know, he comes on. It's unusual for a heavyweight these days, right, to come on in the second half of a fight, but he's a second half fighter. He is. In the first Tyson Fury fight, Fury was doing great in the first half of the fight. He was kicking Usyk's ass and hurting him with body shots and uppercuts, and I thought, oh wow, this fight's in all Fury's way, and that Usyk came back and hurt him real bad. And the second fight, I thought was pretty close. Also,
agreed.
Fury fight.
Oh, I think absolutely it was a close fight. Yes,
yeah.
It was that knockdown. It was the second fight, right? With the knockdown in the ninth. With
that was the first fight.
Oh, that was the first fight. Okay, but no, I agree. Well, and then actually both fights were pretty close, frankly.
They were absolutely right. Absolutely right. But you know what? Dubois has looked very good. But I think that's been more a question of matchmaking than, which is often the case. I think when you get to a certain age and a certain degree of experience, I think you don't really improve. You just look better or worse depending on who your opponent is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And Dubois has fought a couple of guys that he would do well against. Or that he did well against, based on his style and the weaknesses of the other guy, like AJ, okay, who was scared to death of Dubois, in my view, as soon as they got in the ring. Anthony Joshua,
yes,
and that's a guy who I've been frustrated over
for almost 15 years now. Yeah,
I thought he was going to be the next George Foreman. I really did. He had everything I thought that he needed, but he just got lost along the way. He decided he wanted to be a boxer, not a puncher anymore. And then he found out he really didn't have a chin. And then he looked again scared to death against Dubois and stiff as a board and like a complete novice. And I think that he was just scared of Dubois' power. And then we found out why. He knocked him flat, and that was it. So I don't think that Dubois has improved in any material way that would serve him against Usyk any more than I think he's the same guy against Usyk that he was against Usyk in their first fight. You know what I'm saying? He just looked good because he was fighting guys who weren't Usyk. He's a fine heavyweight, but I don't see him doing anything against Usyk that he didn't do in their first fight. And maybe he left the distance this time. I guess if Usyk wants to take him out, and he might late, but I don't see it really being any different. Dubois is a fine fighter, and he can knock out a lot of guys, but he's just not. I don't think he's on Usyk's level, even at this very late stage of Usyk's career.
3 more heavyweights before we get back to your list, because they're all, I think, in interesting positions of their career. Deontay Wilder coming back. I know. Indeed. And, honestly, Bill, I feel like a bad American because I really did want to get behind the one great heavyweight, great air quotes, of the last 20 years, I guess. But man, I never cared for his demeanor in terms of a lot of the press conferences and the other, and really kind of trying to be, well, I'm the new baddest man on the planet. And it's like, no, I think matchmaking, as you said earlier, with the case of Dubois really helped him out. But yeah, yeah. So your I guess, is your comment on him wanting to come back?
Yeah, he's already signed to fight somebody, but
yeah.
He's a tough case because the guy had real power. Like when he was at his best, he fought a lot. He fought. How many title defenses did he make? Like 11. He made 11.
Oh yeah.
A high number of title defenses, and he knocked a lot of guys flat, cold. He could really punch, but he never learned how to fight.
Right.
He just never learned how to fight. He could great one-hand puncher, but
so don't get me wrong. And obviously, God forbid you get hit with that right cross, you're going down and likely out unless you're Tyson Fury. But no, and he's really been exposed. And in fact, the next guy I wanted to ask you about, because I think through matchmaking, but I think also the guy has shown really grit since his last couple losses, Joseph Parker. I mean, I got to say, man, that's a hell of a comeback. I don't know where it's going, but way to go, Joe, for sticking in there and exposing guys like and already I'm blanking on who we were just talking about.
Wilder.
Yeah, I'd say Wilder, absolutely. But against and Zhang as well.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, he's just been he's really been great. Yeah. How do you assess where Joseph Parker is right now?
He's grinding it out, and he's in a good spot. He's in a good spot, but he's not, because he's probably one of the 3 best heavyweights in the world. But he's not beating Usyk, right? I think his whole career he's demonstrated is not beating Usyk, but he'll beat almost everybody else.
Yeah.
He's been grinding it out. He's willing to fight anybody. He grinds out these victories. He fights a long time if he has to, deep into fights, and he holds on to his power and comes in shape. So he does about everything you could ask a heavyweight contender to do. He's never going to be a great fighter, but he's a tough guy who's fairly fun to watch fight, and he gets the job done when he comes out. And yeah, you got to hand it to him, because it looked like his career was in the shitter a while ago. And he keeps coming up with these victories, and good for him.
And it's a pleasure to see him dismantle these bigger guys with boxing smarts and not afraid to be in the pocket and potentially get hit. Deontay Wilder, classic example, man. I mean, he was in the range, yet managed to be able to diffuse him and really, expose Wilder. I mean, it's one thing for Fury to destroy Wilder in their 3 fights, because 3 fights, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to make sure. But yeah, that's because it's big man against big man and stuff. But Joe is smaller compared to these mega heavyweights that we're dealing with these days, and is just really beating them with skill. And I think that's impressive. Now, the final guy that I wanted to know about, because of his win against Anthony Joshua, is Andy Ruiz. Another UG. Okay,
I consider him a lost cause.
Okay, really too heavy. Obviously, really can't train enough to be effective.
I guess he's another guy, like in my mind, he's another guy like Galata, who just has some sort of psychological I don't want to say condition, but bearing that again, maybe afraid of success. For a guy to come in as overweight as he did again in his rematch with Anthony Joshua, like 30 pounds heavier than when he beat him. And I know a lot of people say, well, Buster Douglas came in against Evander Holyfield out of shape and was heavier than he was against Tyson. It seems different because it was the same guy. It was the same guy he just beat. He just knocked out Anthony Joshua. And he's got to know that, and he wins the heavyweight title. He's got to know that he's fighting the same guy, and he just didn't train. He comes in 30 or 40 pounds heavier, and who was his last fight against? The guy. Wow,
the Cuban. Was it the Cuban? No. The Cuban or no?
No, it was the guy who got lit up with steroids. Whose name I can't think of.
Oh, I'm sorry, everybody. Yeah, I can't think of it either. Apologies.
Everybody knows who we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, you've talked about the 3 heavyweights that you wanted to talk about, and I'm going to talk about the guy I think is the future of the heavyweight division.
Tell me, please.
And I'm so excited about this guy, and people I think are probably roll their eyes whenever I bring this guy's name up. Agit Kabayel from Germany. Have you seen this guy fight?
I have.
This guy is a fucking beast. I'm sorry, I shouldn't.
No, you can swear. It's all right.
No, this dude is a fucking beast. He is a beast, and I tweeted this, and I got all kinds of shit for it. He is the best heavyweight body puncher I've ever seen, because he doesn't throw body punches to set up the knockout. He throws body punches to score the knockout. Okay, he knocks guys out with body punches, and not like one body punch out of nowhere, not like Bernard Hopkins knocked out De La Hoya with a body punch. Not like that. I mean combinations to the body where the guy just says fuck it and goes down. He's won his last 3 fights by knockout. And these were steps up in competition for him. He beat Arslanbek Makhmudov, who was a big undefeated guy, supposed to be killing anybody, knocked him out with body shots. Then he beat Frank Sanchez, the undefeated Cuban. Real good boxer, everybody's real high on, knocked him out with body shots. And then he beat Zalil Zhang, the Big Bang, knocked him out with body shots. Guy throws combinations to the body, 1 or 2 shots to the head and right back to the body. Again, and people freaked out. You ever see Joe Frazier fight? Yeah, Joe Frazier was a great body puncher. He he threw hooks to the body to set up hooks to the head. This guy throws hooks to the head to set up hooks to the body. He's really consistent. I've never seen a body puncher like this guy. He's got a great chin. I watched a couple of his earlier fights where he was in toe-to-toe slugfest. He got decked a couple times. Big Bang dropped him, got up to win. Outside of Usyk, I don't see anybody beating this guy. This guy is really something to watch fight. He really is.
It's exciting right now because there are a couple prospects that are looking good.
Absolutely.
And because really, I did feel like 10 years ago, we were in a new, dare I say, golden era of heavyweights where there really were several guys and not just, Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua and the like. Right. And it's like, wait a minute, and of course we saw Usyk and everything. So yeah, I don't know if Usyk, I wonder how much longer Usyk will hang out, frankly.
I can't imagine much longer.
He's getting in his mid-30s and everything,
Exactly. He's an older guy, and I've never gotten the impression that he's in love with boxing the way a lot of guys are, right? Seems like a means to an end for him, which is fine. So I'm not sure. Maybe he's just making so much money now but he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who needs that much either. So I don't know. Let him fight as long as he wants to. It's a pleasure to watch him fight.
100%.
He's a hell of a fighter.
I'm not ready to put him as an all-time great because I think you assess that after a career.
Sure. Yeah.
But I do respect that he is going to be an all-time great and is already a Hall of Famer. And look forward to the real assessments of his career when it's over against the other classics. It's always hard, as I'm sure you guys know, when you were doing Ringside Seat to really compare eras and guys from different eras and stuff. So no, but certainly the greatest heavyweight of the last 20 years, you got to say that.
Yeah, probably. And the guy cleaned out the cruiserweight division, unified the title, unified the heavyweight title, beat the guy nobody else could beat. What more could you ask?
Yeah.
And beat Anthony Joshua twice.
Yep.
Beat Fury twice. And again, it was one of those guys who was too small to fight these giant heavyweights, Yeah. You keep finding out. Everybody keeps talking about how great these giant heavyweights are. And we find out eventually the best ones are always around like 6'4", 230 in that area, 6'4", 240 maybe. Once you get these guys who are like 6'7", 6'8", I don't know. It never seemed to me. I know that a lot of people are in love with Tyson Fury. And in fact, we were on your show one time with Nigel Collins, my great friend at her. I think Don Stradley also, I think, was on that, and Michael Cronenberg, talking about Ringside Seat. And we were talking about the second Fury Deontay Wilder fight. And I said that I thought Fury looked like shit. And yeah, and that's kind of the way you reacted. And Nigel, so what are you talking about? He kicked his ass, right? He kicked his ass. But there's winning, and there's winning ugly. Anytime and just from an aesthetic standpoint, anytime Tyson Fury was going after somebody being aggressive, I couldn't stand the way he was so ungainly, and he won in an ugly way. On the other hand, when he moved and boxed like he did against Wilder in their first fight, I should say, I loved it. Because it was so unusual. Absolutely. His defense was fantastic. And there's never been a guy that big who could move like that.
Well, that 100%. Yes. I mean, that was his strength, was he hit like a heavyweight, but he moved like a middleweight. Absolutely. And then when he was in the clinches, and I know I said this one when we were all talking, he would lean on a fighter, right. And it was like a building leaning on you.
Sure.
And it's like, and it would, I mean, those kind of moves were just as weakening as a punch would be. So I hear what you're saying. Now, what I didn't like was, and it happened really against Klitschko when he won the title, was his cutie pie kind of phase when he'd stick his tongue out and a lot of showboating and not enough punching. But I did think, and he did a little of that, I think, in the first fight against Wilder. But I really felt in the second fight he was just so much more altogether, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, he was aggressive and he completely muscled him and he overpowered him and all that stuff. And I recognize that he completely beat his ass, but it just in that style, that style wasn't aesthetically pleasing to me for him as a fighter. But I get it; he completely beat his ass.
More people checking in, which is very nice. This is interesting. Rudy made a point, and I actually saw one of his blowouts. He said his prime was in the 80s, but Bone Crusher Smith was still fighting in the 90s. What do you think of Bone Crusher Smith as a contender, in his era?
He was a little bit like Wilder, a big, strong guy who could punch real well, but not a whole lot else. He wasn't tremendously skilled. He was a big, tough guy. He gave Holmes a few problems, right? Because he was as big as Holmes, and a strong guy and awkward. I thought he would have done much better, of course, against Mike Tyson. Excuse me, if he wasn't. People forget that fighters are human and they have an instinct for self-preservation, just like we all do, right? we don't want to see that. But sometimes a fighter can't control it. He wants to live, right? And I think Bone Crusher against Tyson, which is the fight that most people think of when they think of his career.
He
wanted to live in that fight.
Yeah, he clutched the whole time until like the last 30 seconds of the fight.
And then
he actually blocked Tyson a couple times. Exactly. We're like, wait a minute. Can't this be 15 rounds? Come on.
Right. He had a couple of real big wins, though. He had that great win over Tim Witherspoon, right? And I think he had a real good win over Frank Bruno, didn't he? Might have been an early loss in Bruno's career.
I'm gonna have to go back and check that. But again, we can. So. Thank you, YouTube, for everybody doing
exactly
it.
Right. Exactly right.
Donnell Nicholson, who was the Olympian back in, I want to say 92, was from Chicago, and I'm happy to say that not only some of his pro fights, but also some of his amateur fights prior to the Olympics are on YouTube. And cool. His management included a very famous Chicago politician named Edward Doliak. And I remember one of his first, maybe even his pro debut, but I know I was one of the analysts at the fight and stuff. He's like, "What do you think of my kid?" I'm like, "He's got to learn how to punch, man." I go, "You want my honest opinion?" I go, "He's a slick boxer." I said, "But this isn't the amateurs anymore. He's got to have a punch." And he goes, "You're right. That's the biggest problem right now." I said, "Well, there you go, man."
Yeah, he could fight though. Yeah, he could fight.
Rudy says that you are correct about Frank Bruno fighting Bone Crusher Smith. So there you go.
Yeah.
Attaboy. There you go. Absolutely, man. This is why I like talking to you guys, Bill. Guys like you and Nigel and Don and Michael and stuff. And I honestly, we were talking about it. And maybe here I'll slightly obligate you that maybe next month and stuff we will like. What we'll do is, as you said about the Foreman fight that we were talking about earlier, that we'll watch. You won't be able to see us watching it, but what we would recommend is either on a later date or as we're talking about a fight that you open up another tab and watch the fight with us, and we can comment as we watch one of the classic fights. I think that would be great.
That sounds fun. Yeah,
absolutely. Do you have time to talk about these other two that you wanted to mention?
Sure. What do we got? What's left on the list?
Well, Tank Davis and Lamont Roach, the rematch.
Oh, yeah. Really looking forward to that one because Lamont Roach put it to Tank Davidson, and we all Tank Davis, and we all know what happened with the knockdown that wasn't a knockdown. So absolutely, Roach deserves a rematch, and I'm looking forward to that one. It should be good. Tank Davis is already talking about retiring, and maybe he's got so much money that he's serious. But I can't tell you, you've been listening to these fighters for as long as I have. Oscar De La Hoya wanted to retire by the time he was 28. Juan Diaz was going to go back to school and be a lawyer. Evander Holyfield wanted to quit when he was in his 20s. Sugar Ray Leonard wanted to quit after winning the title against Wilfred Benitez. All these guys talk about quitting in their 20s or whatever. And 20 years later, they're still fighting. So
I hear you. The one guy that it stuck with, and now I'm blanking on his name, the light heavyweight champion. He fought. I can't think of his name right now, but he really just retired in the last couple of years, and he had those crazy matches with another, I think, Polish light heavyweight. And
I think about Andre Ward.
I am thinking about Andre Ward, and it seems to have stuck. And
And
hey, listen, please don't come back, Andre, because truly you had a hell of a run, and you retired undefeated, and truly, I think I think one of the bright spots of 175. When he was champ and everything. So don't come back. Please don't come back.
It's another guy who I'm trying to figure him out too. I can't figure him out. Like how is it that all these guys, he didn't make that much money, right? When you think about it.
Yeah.
When a guy like Evander Holyfield made like $300 million and he was bankrupt 10 years later, or Tyson, of course, all the millions he made. And he did, how much could Andre Ward have made in his career? 20 million?
Maybe. And then of course he had the two movies, the two Creed movies as well.
Was it those? I don't watch boxing movies.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Really? That's interesting, Bill. Really?
I never watch boxing movies.
Wow.
The only boxing movie I can watch are a couple. The first Rocky, which I absolutely love.
Great movie.
And the Scorsese movie, of course, the one about LaMotta.
Raging Bull.
Raging Bull.
That's it?
Wow. I've never watched these Creed movies. I didn't watch the Vinny Pazienza movie. I didn't watch the Mickey Ward movie. I don't watch any of them.
All right. Bleed for this. The Vinny Paz movie is actually, I think, pretty entertaining. And I'm not a Miles Teller fan, but I got to hand it to him. I think he did a hell of a job. And it's great because it really gets into the Paz Kevin Rooney relationship. And yes, it's of course fictionalized, but that's okay. I got no problem with that. Southpaw with now, and again I'm blanking. And he's a good actor. I can't think of his name right now, but that was pretty good with Forrest Whitaker. Pretty good recent boxing movie. The classics, though, I love the setup, and Michael and I Cronenberg go on and on about how, and it really is great because it's an ugly movie, and it really does kind of show you the lowest level of boxing in the tank towns. And
I do want to see that. Maybe it's in particular the biographies the biopics that I reject. But even the Creed movies, I can't get into them. But the older ones, like the setup, I think I do want to see that. And there are a couple others along. I watched
Body and Soul.
Exactly. I was going to say that with Garfield, right? Exactly. Yep. I watched that years ago.
Oh yeah, and even Kirk Douglas in Champion.
Right. I think I saw that years ago as well.
So yeah, I mean, again, man, and that's why I was so happy when you're like, hey, if anybody wants to talk about these old fights, like this Foreman fight, and I'm like, right here, how you doing?
Exactly right. Exactly.
Bill, you're really, it is always a pleasure to talk analysis with you on this stuff.
Thank you.
Well, honestly, and I think you do a great job. I mean, would this forum be of interest of you to do your own podcast and everything, and to get back in any way?
You know what? Eric Raskin and I did a podcast for 7 years called Ring Theory that had kind of a cult following. We had some really great listeners who were really loyal to us and listened to us a couple times a month. And now I just guest other places.
Okay.
And Eric and I did one called Breaking Bill, which was a rewatch of Breaking Bad. And that was fun. Yeah, that was fun. But I don't know.
It was nice. I saw Raskin retweet that we were getting together tonight, and I loved when Raskin was doing. Didn't he do the Showtime one?
Yes, he did. Still going? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I really respect Raskin, and that's the thing, man.
Very smart guy.
Well, yeah, and honestly, I feel tangentially connected to you guys for my years of covering when I covered Dedicated in the 90s through about 2006, when I worked for my various broadcast outlets, and I wrote for Boxing Illustrated, wrote a little bit for Ring Magazine. So yeah, man. I mean, I remember when Dan Rayfield was new on the scene, and now he's one of the grizzled veterans and everything. Shame, man. I'm telling you, man. I got to take Ginkgo biloba or the fish guts to make my brain work better and everything. Whatever it is that helps your memory and stuff. Oh my God, he was. I don't know if he's still the editor-in-chief over at Ring, but he was working for De La Hoya, I know, and he was working for the magazine prior to De La Hoya too.
What's his name? Dougie Fisher.
Yeah, Dougie Fisher. Love Dougie Fisher, man.
Yeah,
I love talking to him, and great guy and everything. I'm interested to see now that the Sheik Turk has taken over and that his Riyadh season has bought Ring Magazine. I haven't really gone to the website or seen what they've done with the property now. I mean, it's a shame. It seems like Boxing Monthly is the last pure boxing magazine that's still out there and really doing great stuff. And listen, everybody, if you've got a favorite boxing podcast, I think Tris Dixon does a hell of a job when he does his interviews. I think that's a great show. I love when Eric has done stuff. I don't know if Eric's doing a current show now, but I mean, so there's good analysts out there.
Yeah, I don't think he's doing a boxing podcast right now, Eric. He's doing some other podcast, but not boxing related.
Well, maybe we can convince him to join us sometime.
That would be cool. I'm sure he would.
You've got a new book coming up as well?
I do. I have a book coming out in the fall, named after that podcast I just mentioned. It's called Ring Theory, Meditations on 35 Years in Boxing. And it's an anthology of some of the stuff I did for The Ring and World Boxing and Boxing Yearly and KO and Ringside Seat and HBO. So that'll come out in the fall.
I read all those magazines back in the day, man. I was
Cool.
I was a dedicated reader, especially from my college years through when I was covering things. So no, man, it's that's great to hear. And also, I'm just really sad. I see that by the end of the month, ESPN is going to end its relationship with Top Rank.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. I know that a lot of folks are up in arms about it. Well, I shouldn't say up in arms, but upset about it because it looks like as no more boxing on cable now either, right?
We've lived through those periods where
Right.
it was network broadcasting, like we were talking about earlier, and then we all drifted off to cable, and beyond HBO and Showtime, we had the weekly shows from ESPN and USA in our youth that we loved so much. And and it felt like, you know, ESPN was kind of making more of a real effort to kind of bring that back for the couple of years that the deal lasted. I have to confess, I was never a big PBC fan because I just don't like the way Al Heyman and PBC runs their champions and contenders. And it really was so, we talked about it on previous shows, how it was so siloed off from the rest of the sport. I didn't get that same vibe from Top Rank. It always felt to me that Top Rank tried to make good deals. And again, that's Bob Arum, even in his 90s, still a powerhouse in the business.
Yeah. I'm not really worried about ESPN ending its relationship with Top Rank because, number one, I've seen that. I think I've read somewhere that there's already negotiations for some other cable company to pick up.
Oh, good.
But even if there isn't, it's just another evolution, right?
I suppose.
And people are moving away from just as people moved away from network television to cable. Now they're moving away from cable to streaming services and apps and that kind of stuff. So it just means that the media is moving, and it's more work for guys like us to find where the fights are, right?
Yeah.
And to figure out how to get them, right? It's more work for us because we're used to going, not even this, right? Not even the remote control. We turned the TV on as kids at the TV, right?
Yeah.
So it's more work for us, but it's just in the days when the fights were just on the radio. And then they started moving to TV. People said, "Oh my God, it's the end of boxing. And they're going to kill the fight clubs, and they're going to kill those stadium fights. They're putting them on TV, right?" It's just the way it is. The medium is changing. That's all.
Yeah,
so if people want to watch fights, they'll find them.
That's fair.
They don't.
I bought a used book on Amazon years ago, and it was from a Minneapolis boxing writer of the 50s, and this book came out in the early 60s. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was lamenting the encroachment of television on the fights, and it really was. It was really fascinating. And again, this is why I really appreciate the history of boxing, the same way that people do about the major sports and how much they love the history of baseball, basketball, hockey, football. Right. So I get it because I feel that way about boxing. I do worry that our sport is getting smaller and smaller in terms of fan appreciation. So we're kind of the last guys that are still listening to our Victrolas and listening to our 78s, man. And that was really Rudy Valley was quite something back in the 20s.
That's exactly right. But here's the thing, and this is going to sound morbid, I suppose, but soon we'll be dead. Right?
That's you're not.
No, but listen. Let me follow along here. Soon we'll be dead, and then eventually everybody in our era who grew up watching free fights on network TV will also be dead.
True.
And then nobody will know or appreciate what that was like. So then whatever is that at that time will be the normal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's the way it works. It's the way life is.
No, I hear you, man. There's an author that wrote a great book about the relationship between boxing and hip hop just a couple of years ago. And in fact, I read about it. I think I read about it in a ringside seat, frankly.
Yeah, I think so. I think Belgium might have reviewed the book. Yeah.
There you go, man. And no, I'm really curious to get that author on and talk about the evolution and everything of those two things. Matthew Whitaker, before we wrap, a couple interesting comments. He says Dan Rayfeld's podcast is good. I agree. I haven't heard Brian Campbell and Sergio Mora's podcast, but that's cool to hear. He also says, I'm going to miss ESPN's cards from Japan on the East Coast. I can wake up, drink a cup of coffee, and catch the main event. I so agree. It has been such a pleasure watching those Japanese cards. He says if the Brian Norman fight is the last morning fight I see, it was a heck of a way to go out.
That dude can fight. Brian Norman's a very good fighter. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, my God, anyway, a guy that we didn't even mention who, as we have talked about him in the past, he, to me, reminds me of Duran in Duran's lightweight years. That just a pleasure to watch, a phenom. Yeah.
You know what's interesting to me? And I just thought of this now.
Tell me.
When people say how great he is, and how he might be an all-time great, I don't see any convergence of old diehards amassing to attack the idea that he's an all-time great like you do with other fighters. You know what I'm saying?
Agreed.
People say Terrence Crawford's an all-time great, and people assail that person saying he didn't fight this, he didn't fight that, he's this, he's that. But nobody says that about it anyway. And I don't know. Is it because he looks that much? He does look better, but not that much better.
Well,
I wonder why that is.
I don't know, man. I mean, it seems like every fight it's a spectacular knockout, but I also think, unlike likely the Asian countries that surround Japan that have maybe a more cognizant idea of what's happening in the bantamweight divisions and the featherweight divisions, you know, then maybe that's why we don't. Bill, are you part of what I've appreciated as the alphabet belt boys start losing their power? There seems to be a consortium of boxing journalists who have gotten together, created a federation where they rate the fighters. And it reminds me of when Bert Sugar was kind enough to put me on the Budweiser panel that Boxing Illustrated established for Ring and Boxing Illustrated. And I felt very privileged to be part of that. And I really worked hard to know what was happening in flyweight and super flyweight and bantamweight divisions so that I could give, you know, educated opinions and things. But are you part of that group at all?
I am not. And my brain just doesn't. I would put out the worst ratings. If it were up to me, they'd be terrible and full of holes and contradictions. My brain doesn't work. It's too much like math with me. I couldn't do it. Even when I was, with the Ring, and occasionally I'd be asked to have some input on the ratings. I just never. It's just not my thing. I can't do it. You know, I could point out what's wrong with everybody else's ratings, right? And I can point out, of course, the inconsistencies in the governing body's ratings, right? Anybody can do that. A 2-year-old can do that, right? But I can't do ratings. My brain isn't wired that way.
That reminds me, we lost a great friend to boxing from the 70s and early 80s. A media critic here in Chicago. I mentioned it to you when we were talking about doing this. A guy named Gary Deeb. And in the early 70s, if people don't remember, and I wonder how many of those fights are on YouTube. I haven't really looked to see. But Don King and ABC and Al Braverman all got together in the 70s, and they had what was called the U.S. Boxing Championship.
Right.
And on paper, it seemed like a good idea until you found out that middleweight contender at the time, Marvin Hagler, was not allowed to participate because he wouldn't sign a King promotional contract. And Gary and Flash Gordon, a great independent writer from the 70s and 80s, even into the 90s, who had a great boxing newsletter, really homemade media, you know, in the pre-internet world. I mean, again, this is starting even in the 70s. The two of them really exposed what kind of sham the U.S. Boxing Championships were.
Sure.
And I think, if I remember correctly, the only guy that really got screwed by it all was Al Braverman. Even King managed to walk away pretty scandal-free. But Gary was one of those guys here in Chicago that was exposing how these were bullshit fights and everything. So I don't know if you remember that period at all.
Sure, I do, and I know that the guys who were running the Ring at the time were responsible too.
That's right.
Yeah, they were taking payoffs to put guys in the ratings to justify their participation in the tournament. That was pre the Ring that I worked at, and and also before anybody that I was associated with worked at that. When I came into the Ring, it was Nigel Collins and Steve Farhood, and both of those guys, of course, both great guys, came well after that whole scandal.
Right, and it was kind of after the glory days of Ring, from the going back to even the 30s, if not the 20s, all the way until this period. And even it was before Bert's time, I think, when he was editor-in-chief of Ring. I don't think Bert was involved with that stuff. I could be wrong.
No, he wasn't. In fact, I think he was running Boxing Illustrated at the time.
There you go.
Maybe. I don't know. It's possible.
Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, I worked for the 90s of Boxing Illustrated that Bert ran and stuff, and I miss that guy. He was always a pleasure to talk to and everything. So,
character.
As you're a pleasure to talk to, man.
Thank you.
Well, listen, I don't want to keep you longer. It's getting later and everything, your time. But thanks so much, man. No, truly, this is a pleasure. And let's figure out a day in July, and let's do that commentary of
decide on a fight. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and well, and also, again, depending on the length of the fight, we can also maybe throw in some current news about what's coming up and everything. I hope you'll
be happy to.
That'd be great, man. All right,
Sounds
and
good.
everyone, we're looking forward to Bill's next book. Again, give us the title. Fight Hype.
The title is Ring Theory.
Ring Theory. I beg your pardon.
Yeah, Ring Theory: Meditations on 35 Years in Boxing.
Well, I loved Nigel's book where he collected a lot of his essays, and I'm expecting the same thing from me, Bill. And again, based on what you did in your Matthew Saad Muhammad biography and your Ezra Charles biography, I know I won't be disappointed. So good luck with that.
Thank you very much, John.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Tomorrow night, we're going to go back to comics, and my buddy Tim Sheridan is going to be on. He's going to talk about his work at DC, but also he's taking over Star Trek Lower Decks for IDW, one of the great comedies in the Star Trek world. So that's going to be a fun conversation on Monday night right here on Word Balloon Live. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.